Alrighty, we are live. Moneyline MMA coming back from a good week of MMA fights. UFC Vegas 98 last Saturday. We're obviously coming in to discuss UFC Fight Night. I almost said Alex Hernandez. Anthony Hernandez versus Michelle Pereira, the main event at least. And some other good fights on the card. I think co-main event Rob Font versus Kyler Phillips is pretty solid. At least Rob Font brings some name value. And there's some other like sneaky good fights on the card that aren't necessarily top end names necessarily in the division or in the UFC in general. But before we get too far deep into our picks for this Saturday, let's quick discuss last Saturday, in which we saw Brandon Royval, the dog, get the job done in the main event. And Jose and I really handicapped it to perfection, if you ask me. Both Jose and I had Brandon Royval as our two weights, but still confident enough two weights, at least from my perspective. I had money down on Brandon Royval, and it was pretty. He honestly, it was close, right? I'll give credit where credit is due and say, it's not that Royval completely cleaned up Tyra, but Tyra very clearly had to go for wrestling. He was losing the stand-up exchanges every time, every single time, and that's where I knew it was going to be the case. You can go back and watch last week's show. I think we knew that the stand-up game is going to be where it's real different, and that Royval isn't going to die out or gas out. And to be honest, I think that's the only reason he really ended up winning the fight, because he got the round 5 win to get the decision, and that kind of put him over the edge, if you ask me. Where he also had Tyra in a spot where it looked like he was going to get the technical KO, where Tyra wasn't fully out, but he was just getting beat on, and the ref didn't call it. All fairness to Tyra, and Tyra was able to come back and at least get himself through the rest of the fight. But I think it was really clear that Royval was the better man. I just appreciate the judges not favoring Tyra at all in some of the rounds where it seemed like he was wrestling his way to victory. In fact, the one different round, if I recall correctly, was round 1 instead of round 3, where I pretty much thought it was a foregone conclusion that Brandon Royval won round 1. One of the judges actually had Tyra, winning that round. So that's where the split decision came in. So I don't know. It's interesting to me, but regardless, Royval gets the job done. As far as 5 weights go, Chidi Niokwani gets the job done for me as my 5 weight, and Grant Dawson gets the job done for Jose. In fact, Jose, with a clean slate of picks, his 4 weight was canceled. Of course, his opponent, I believe it was Josh Fremd, did not make weight, so they canceled the fight. It was bad enough to where they just outright didn't fight at all. There's some suspicion it'll go onto the card we're going to be discussing here in a minute, but that has not been confirmed. And then otherwise, there was one disagreement with Alex Morono, and it was D-Rod. And I had Morono as my 3 weight, and Jose had D-Rod as his 1 weight and got that pick correct as well. Morono looked good, and I believe came out stronger in round 1. He was winning that fight at round 1, but credit to D-Rod for really sticking in there and winning the striking game, and not giving Morono an opportunity to choke him out. So really got to respect what D-Rod was able to do, because I thought Morono had a finish lined up for sure. And that's really about it for the card. That was UFC 98 in a nutshell. Grant Dawson, I know we briefly mentioned that Jose, he hit Jose's 5 weight, but dang, he looked good, man. He looked really good. So excited to see him fight again. But without further ado, excuse me, will get us into the picks for this Saturday. Just a quick reminder to anyone who is new, we do a 5-weight pick system here at Moneyline MMA, where Jose and I discuss, we pick of 5 of the 11 fights on this card that's currently UFC Vegas 99, and weigh them in order of confidence. 5 weight being the most confident, 1 weight being the least confident. We always start with our locks of the week here, which AKA is the 5 weight pick. And we only just confer on our weights. So this is done individually, and we only confer on our weights right before the show, just so we know what order we're going in. Because as I said, we bring our 5 weights to you guys first. So that being said, I'm going to take us into the main event, at least what's currently listed as, subject to change based on fights being added and removed from this card. What's currently scheduled to be the main event of the prelims. I'm taking Asu Almabayev as my 5-weight to beat Mateus Nicolau. Asu Almabayev, to my surprise, started out as like a minus 160 favorite and has now been bet down to 190 minus 192, and Nicolau is at plus 148. So that's reason number one. If you see a line moving that heavy, there's a reason, right? A line doesn't open at minus 160 and move all the way down to minus 192 by just the public seeing something, right? That there's more than just the public involved in something like that, and it's just going to show that Asu Almabayev is the better fighter. He really has better strengths, I think, in both aspects of the game in terms of grappling and striking. I give a lot of respect to Nicolau. He's been able to dog out some fights, and his only losses have been against really respectable opponents like Royval and Alex Perez. So I get it, right? People are seeing his potential. They know that he was able to finish Matt Schnell, but he's also gone to a couple of boring decisions, if you ask me, against mid-fighters. So I just haven't seen enough out of Nicolau. And okay, we could make a similar argument in that Asu Almabayev is a prospect. He isn't a tenured veteran yet, but he's been able to finish a couple of his opponents, and also his most recent fight earlier this year against Jose Johnson. I also remember discussing that on this show, Jose, and we both had Almabayev at the time, and the only difference was the fact that Jose Johnson's like 6 foot tall at 125 pounds. He's like one of the tallest dudes ever at that weight class, and that was the only thing we were like, I wonder how Almabayev will deal with that. That's a unique thing to have to deal with. He comes in and gets the unanimous decision win. So I think Almabayev's more of the same here. You know what you're getting out of him. He's got a strong submission game. Okay, Nicolau's never been submitted before. Fine. Nicolau's been finished, though, twice in a row. And, I mean, yeah, okay, Almabayev's primary threat is not hard punch power, but he still has KOs under his belt. He still has the ability to land a club and sub. He could get a knockdown and jump on a guy's neck. I think there are so many outcomes that could be found from the striking game from this fight. And in my opinion, it's all leaning towards Almabayev here. And to put the icing on the cake, you're getting just below 2-1 odds here on a fight that I think he wins 9 out of 10 times. I don't think that's crazy to say. So give me Almabayev very confidently for my 5-weight. Any thoughts, Jose?
Yeah, Nick. For this fight, I did not have a pick because for me it was just really hard to make a decision. Nick, if I was going to, I was originally looking at Matus Nicolau. He's just so good, and like you said, his last 2 fights, no shame in losing to Alex Perez and Brandon Royval. And the thing with Alimbayev is even though we did talk about him earlier against the Jose Johnson fight and the CJ Pereira fight, and even Adi Osborne, those fights, that's the most I've seen out of him in the UFC. Whereas opposed to Nicolau's been already in the UFC quite a bit longer. So that being said, I think Matus Nicolau is going to put a really good fight, and as you mentioned, I think the striking is going to be a big aspect of this game. I think, but I think Alimbayev, is what you mentioned, is he's got really good grappling as well. So I think he may even take over in that aspect and just completely rack up a lot of points on Nicolau. It's just a really hard. This was a hard fight for me to pick because I look at it both ways. But I do think if Alimbayev wins, I think he's going to win this but probably by KO or TKO. But if it comes down to it, you mentioned he has strong submission. I can see him gain the submission or ultimately unanimous decision win. With Nicolau, I think if he wins, he's going to have to catch Asu early. Again, I just haven't seen enough of Asu, but if he beats Nicolau, I definitely think he's going to be a big problem in this division. But as of now, I really have no pick, but I do like the Alimbayev pick.
Sounds good, man. And I see what you're saying, right? Like, experience in the UFC does matter to a certain degree, but we literally just saw Dana White announce that Alexander Pantoja's next opponent is going to be the former Risen champ. 0 out of 0 fights in the UFC. He's 0 for 0. So I think I bring that up to say that, like, it's not the UFC that only brings good competition, and I'm personally trying to come around to that more. There's great competition in multitudes of other promotions outside of Bellator, outside of you know, one championship. There's so many more organizations out there with just talent teaming from this, like prospect talent specifically. So the fact that Almabayev still has 22 professional fights under his belt makes me feel like he's kind of been there. Like I get that. Okay, maybe Nicolau's got a few more UFC opponents, and definitely don't fault him for losing to Royval. Of course, I like Royval. He just won me some money last weekend. And Alex Perez is a stud. Like he might be falling off a little bit now, but obviously he had his time in which he was very dominant. So obviously not the best, worst guys to lose to, but I would say Alex Perez at this stage of his career is kind of a tough loss in my opinion. Especially getting knocked out. It'd be one thing if it was a decision, but man, getting finished by a guy like Alex Perez, I feel like that's getting finished by Jose Aldo nowadays, which also isn't really that big of a. I feel like Jose Aldo also won his last fight, but you know what I'm saying. Like it's just kind of a tough spot to get knocked out in. But hey, maybe that does give him motivation to come back and be like, there's no way I'm getting finished 3 times in a row. But in the end, it's not his choice. It's not his choice. If he's not as good of a fighter, he doesn't get to choose being finished. So, yeah. That being said, though, Jose does not have a pick on this. I do have a 5-weight on Asu Almabayev, so we'll move on over to see what Jose's got in store for his lock of the week.
So for my 5-weight, this is actually already the middleweight bout, the main event of the whole card. The fight between Anthony Hernandez and Michel Pereira. Right now, Anthony Hernandez is the betting favorite at minus 146, while Pereira is the betting underdog at plus 114. I'm praise. It's like I don't even know how I feel about Michel Pereira being the underdog for this fight. I think he's looked nothing but phenomenal, and I think every time we talk about Michel Pereira, I think I've almost been picking him now like every single time. I can't think of a single time I've not gone with him and regretted it, because if I said time and time again, like every fight he looks like he's getting better and better, and he went from when he made his UFC debut back in the day. Like, he was like his first couple of fights against Danny Roberts and Tristan Connolly. He was kind of like showboating. Even though Danny Roberts landed quick, he was just, kind of being like a little cocky and showboating and like using more energy than he needed to. And then that definitely showed in the Tristan Connolly fight as well. And just trying to do like all these flips and just, wasting energy. And that's what cost him that fight. And then the Diego Sanchez one as well, ended up getting himself disqualified. And I think after that Diego Sanchez fight, he really learned like his lesson. And I feel like he's learned how to use his explosiveness in a more controlled manner now. And I think because of that, he's becoming a lot more dangerous. He's gone now and won multiple fights in the third round by decision or getting late round submissions. And even then, as of most recently, he's just won 3 fights in a row. One via TKO and now in 2 via submission. So I think him pumping the brakes a little bit helped him a lot to be able to understand when to pick and choose and exert his energy, because it's he needs to be doing this for the long game, because eventually he's going to need to be in top shape for the 4th and the 5th rounds. And I think now he's just been looking more dangerous than ever, just knowing that he can time it right and just finish people right away in the first round. Almost like I don't want to compare him to Alex Pereira, but it can get to that point where like, yo, this guy's like becoming like the new boogeyman. Where Anthony Hernandez, he on the other hand, like when his fights, even though he's been on a tear himself, I think he's shown a little more adversity in his fights in terms of like he's looked like hurt at points, and then has come back and he's really good at boxing. He's got some great boxing, but also a phenomenal submission. And honestly, I don't think he's going to submit Michel Pereira. I think Michel Pereira, he's out of his 11 losses, he's only been submitted once. And I just think that Michel Pereira is just going to be too explosive and too much for him. And I think if Michel Pereira doesn't finish Anthony Hernandez in the 4th and the 5th round, I can see Fluffy coming back and piecing up Michel Pereira as well. But like I said, I think Michel Pereira is just is really good right now. I think he's really getting into a good flow in terms of like where he's at with his career, and just kind of understanding how to play the game right in terms of like his fight IQ and how they match up physically. Like Michel Pereira is the slightly taller guy, but Anthony Hernandez does have a 2-inch reach advantage, and both guys throw a high volume of strikes. So again, on the feet, I think both are just going to be hitting each other a lot. And their striking differential is pretty good. Like I like the 4.3 landed per minute for Anthony Hernandez, with 3.46 absorption rate, and Michel Pereira lands 5.16 per minute and only absorbs 3.7 punches per minute. So I like the striking differential here. Both guys, it's going to be a insane high paced boxing match and a little bit of kickboxing, I think. And at some point, I can see Anthony Hernandez trying to take down Michel Pereira, but again, I think Michel Pereira is going to be too explosive and wacky and wild, and with his takedown defense, that it's just going to be mostly a stand-up game. That's how I think, and I think Michel Pereira ultimately, to wrap it up, is I think he's going to either win by unanimous decision or find a honestly like TQ or KO himself. But I think this may be a decision win. What are your thoughts on this fight, Nick?
Man, I think that was one of the better handicaps I've heard from you in a while, man. I think that teed it up perfectly. I have a full weight on Michel Pereira, and everything you said, I really do agree with. I think it's going to be a mess maybe not a mess necessarily, but Anthony Hernandez is going to have to find some way to take down Pereira because the feet is going to be way too dangerous. Anthony Hernandez is good at boxing, but he does not have anywhere near the explosiveness that Pereira has. I mean, we also have to consider too that a lot of his stats and what happened with him in the UFC is when he was cutting down to 170 and it was a struggle for him. He missed weight a bunch of times, and UFC's like, you're fighting at 185, buddy. They pretty much did to him what they did with Kamzat. It's like, no, you got to fight at this division, or we're not offering you fights at that other division anymore because you can't make weight. And it just seems to be good for Pereira in the sense that he has his explosiveness and his power, and he seems to pick the right times to use it. And literally the only one way I could see Hernandez winning around is if he lands a takedown and just wrestles, like does a Tatsuro Taira and just like kind of, and maybe that was even insulting to Taira because even Taira was also trying to get to the neck and do a submission of some sort. But I just feel like Hernandez wouldn't even want to do that because it would be taking a risk. Pereira could flip the position and get his own submission at any time. Pereira's coming off 2 straight submission wins, dude. This is no joke. Like he could submit Anthony Hernandez in a snap of a finger if Anthony Hernandez isn't careful enough with his wrestling. So, man, it just seems way too risky. And the fact that you're getting plus money, the fact that we're discussing a dog here is really interesting. I'd love to see as the week goes on what they call, I believe, the cover. It's the total amount of money. So you got your total number of bets on a team, and then you have your total amount of money bet on the market in general. Like it's a lot of times a stark difference. Like for example, in the football game tonight, I know for sure that a lot more people have bet on the Bills, but there's a lot more money on the Jets, and that says something. That says that professionals are expecting the Jets to win. People that really like they're betting the game expect the Jets to win, and I'm curious to see what that is with this Pereira Hernandez fight. Maybe more people are betting on Hernandez, but there's no way there's more money on Hernandez. That's crazy to me if that's the case. But in any case, we both agree heavily. 9 points of total confidence on Michel Pereira to get the job done as somehow an underdog in the main event.
So then I think that brings us down to my 4-weight.
Yes, sir.
So so for our 4-weight, now we're going to go from the main event and just jump all the way to the prelims. And this is going to be the heavyweight bout between Austin Lane and Robelis de Spain. Right now, Austin Lane is a betting underdog at plus 300, while Despain is a betting favorite at minus 430. So for this one, last time I think I went with Despain and he lost. But I feel good with him this time. And the reason is because Austin Lane is not good. Like I honestly don't think he's good at all. And I think he's actually a little too undersized for a heavyweight. I think he'd be better off being a light heavyweight. And at least me personally, like dude used to play football, and so he kind of comes from like that, like he's just a big explosive guy. But Despain is just big on a different level. I mean, he's 6'7", and his reach is ridiculous. He has a 8'7", so he has an 87-inch reach. He has a 7-inch reach advantage over a already large man in the 6'6" Austin Lane. So the fact that Austin Lane being 6'6" with an 80-inch reach is the smaller guy in this matchup is wild. Austin Lane does have more fights than Despain, but Despain, from what I recall, he has like a whole history already in the Olympics. I can't remember if it was wrestling or judo or but uh or older in age now. He's 36, but so is Austin Lane. Austin Lane is also 36. So I think in this matchup, I like the bad boy Despain just a lot. I just think he's gonna be able to finish Austin Lane in the first round. Austin Lane, out of his 5 losses, he's been knocked out 5 times, and it seems like majority of those were in the first round, including by Greg Hardy. So if Greg Hardy's knocking you on the first round, I think Despain will definitely knock you out in the first round, especially when the 5 KOs Despain has are all in the first round. That being said, I like Despain a lot. It's a heavyweight match, so anything can happen. Last time that Waldo Cortez Acosta fight, I kind of figured Waldo Cortez, even though I went with Despain, I did had that worry like where he may try to present a little something different in terms of try to stay low and maybe just try to out wrestle this Spain, just try to do something different. Austin Lane, I think if he tries to do that, I think he's just not it won't be as strong as WCA because I think Austin Lane is just not as thick and big as a WCA. So I think Austin Lane will have a harder time trying to take down Despain, and I think Despain's just going to start throwing wild haymakers like he normally does. And when they clip Austin Lane, I think Austin Lane will be lights out because again, I don't. Austin Lane doesn't have a chin, so. Not trying to throw too much fades, anything like towards Austin Lane's side, but that being said, yeah, I don't even think Austin Lane will find Despain's face as much on the feet. Probably could, but I just don't know. I don't think so. That being said, yeah, I got Robelis Despain for this one. He is my 4 weight. What are your thoughts on this fight, Nick?
I don't officially have a weight, but I definitely agree. You take this Spain by KO on the ticket booth and you move on. I think this specifically points towards, I think we've kind of mentioned it. We've at least alluded to it on the past on this show where the UFC does not like I'm not going to say the UFC rigs fights, right? They're not telling a fighter, you got to lose this fight or you got to win this fight or you got to lose this round, right? No. What they are doing though is they're creating storylines. They're fighting such and such against such and such, knowing their temperaments, knowing their styles, knowing their histories, knowing their pasts, right? And they're generating. It's almost like a TV show that's ever going in front of our eyes. And this is just clearly the UFC trying to say, hey, we have this big dude that has a lot of punching power. Let's see what we can do with him. I think this is very clear the UFC giving him a perfect path towards gaining some fans with some flashy KOs. I mean, like you said, I'm not trying to rag on Austin Lane. This is just very clearly a situation where the UFC goes, let's put someone in there that he can knock out. I think that's really clear. And I don't think much more needs to be said than that. So, specifically, if you're going to bet on Despain, you might as well do a single bet by KO. Don't bother parlaying that because it's heavyweights. We don't bet on heavyweights like that around here unless you're trying to lose money. So, that being said, that'll be Jose's 4 weight.
Yes, sir. And yeah. I guess yeah. Enough said about that. Just I feel that strong about Despain. If it wasn't for Michelle Pereira, I'd probably bump Despain up to my 5 weight.
Yeah, I hear you, dude. But Pereira's a dog. We like to see Pereira out here. So, cool. That being said, we're going to move on to my 3 weight of Saturday afternoon. And for my 3 weight, I'm going to be picking Kyler Phillips. So I'm going to be picking Kyler Phillips to defeat Rob Font. This is going to be in the co-main event. Kyler Phillips does happen to be one of the bigger favorites on the card. So let me double check. He's currently on at least FanDuel. He is minus 430, just over 4-1 odds, and Rob Font is plus 300. So it's pretty steep, and it's another spot where I'd be really careful with parlaying anything on here because it is a guy we're talking about here, of course, is Rob Font. He's a dog. And he's not someone you really want to be that confident betting against. Although I will say I did win my last bet against him on Figgy. Figgy was one of my most confident picks of that fight card, and he got the job done. And then of course we got to watch Rob Font get wrestled, by Corey Sandhagen in Nashville. That was kind of a last second replacement fight, but Corey Sandhagen literally just wrestled for like 20 minutes or 25 minutes and got the win there. Kyler Phillips is a stand-up phenom. I mean, if we just look at these guys now, of course, Rob Font has a little bit more UFC experience than Kyler Phillips and therefore a few more professional fights. So more of a sample size is what I'm getting at. But Kyler Phillips, 5.72 strikes landed. Rob Font 5.5. So he's landing just above Rob Font's output, and he absorbs 3.3. Rob Font absorbs 3.6. So the output is just higher for Phillips, and he's receiving just lower than Rob Font in return. On top of that, Kyler Phillips boasts 2.4 takedowns per 15 minutes. I'm impressed by that. I think Kyler Phillips really has shown that he's got an all-around ability. He's not necessarily a ridiculous submission threat, but in his past 3 fights, he's been able to get 2 decision wins and 1 submission win by triangle armbar, in the third round. So it's not like he's out of that realm of getting a submission win. I think he's live, especially if Rob Font is giving him tough pressure on the feet and he feels like he might be a little outmatched. I see him going for takedowns. And let's be honest, Rob Font has very clearly shown a weakness of being taken down and bullied. As for now 2 fights in a row, he's been taken down a combined 11 times and lost 2 unanimous decisions because he can't get on his feet and return fire. So I think Kyler Phillips just has too many ways to victory here. Even if he can't win the stand-up game, he can wrestle. And even if he can't wrestle, he can go for a submission. I think it's too much for Rob Font. What do you think, Jose?
Yeah, Nick, I totally agree with you. I have Kyler, the Matrix Phillips myself, and the reason is as you mentioned it, I think he's going to win this. I think he's going to probably out wrestle Rob.
We're getting
The
some.
thing Rob Font has it's so I think Kyler Phillips. Sorry, can you hear me?
I was about to say yes, I can now. I was just about to interrupt you though because it did lag for a minute, but we're good now. I think.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So, pretty much what I was saying was, yeah, like I agree with you on Kyler Phillips. He is my 2 weight, and I think he's going to definitely be the better wrestler in this matchup, and I think he's going to be doing it to avoid Rob Font's legit boxing power that he has. That's the one thing Rob Font that I think is he just has that powerful KO power, lands in, boom, like how he did Adrian Yanez. So I think Kyler Phillips is going to play a smart game and push Rob Font to the cage and ultimately just look for the takedown. And I think probably drag this out to a unanimous decision win would be the best way. I think Kyler Phillips is going to win this because Rob Font is just such a hard dude to put out. Out of his 8 losses, he's only been finished once via submission. The other 7 were obviously by decision. So I think this is going to be a similar story. Kyler Phillips is going to, I think, out wrestle Rob Font. But again, he's my 2-weight because Rob Font on the feet, both dudes are definitely going to clang and bang. Both are definitely going to be landing on each other, and it depends who comes with the more power. But Rob Font's power is just so legit that he can make it an early night. So this one, I agree with you. I have Kyler Phillips, but he is my 2-weight.
All right, so that's still combined 5 confidence points for us here. So it sounds like it'll be a Michelle Pereira and Kyler Phillips confidence night. Of course, you could also take a look at the Spain from Jose and Amabayev for my 5-weight. But with that said, let's move to Jose's 3-weight.
Yes, so for my 3-weight, this is going to be in the middle. There's going to be the middle fight, the third fight of the night, the bantamweight bout between Brady Highstand and Jake Hadley. Right now, Brady Highstand, he is a betting favorite at -158, while Jake Hadley, he is the betting underdog at +124. This one, Jake Hadley, he's been on and off right now. He's just coming off a win. Before that, he had 2 losses, to one to Cody Durden and one to Charles Johnson. And on the other hand, Brady Hyson, he's not been in the UFC as long, but he's already out of his 4 fights. He's 3-4. He's 3-1 right now, losing to split decision to Ricky Tercio. So Brady Hyson, he's really, I think, doing a good job of moving up the ladder. Like he's been winning in third rounds, and he's been winning different methods. He's getting third round TKO decision. I like him a lot as the underdog. I think that he's going to present a good threat on the feet, and I'm not afraid to say that I think Jake Hadley probably will get a submission win. Out of his 11 wins, yeah, he has 5 via submission, and I think that he can finish and be submit Brady Hyston. Brady Hyston, he's only 25 years old, but he has 8-2, so he has really good experience right now. Not far off from Jake Hadley. And Brady Heiston, he's not much bigger than Jake Hadley. He's 5'8", Hadley's 5'7", and Heiston only has a 1 inch reach advantage. But on the feet, like it hasn't shown much because Brady Heiston hasn't been in the UFC for as long. But yeah, his striking differential isn't that good in terms of he's only landed 2.7 significant strikes per minute and has absorbed 3.75. And Jake Cantley, he's about like almost a 50-50 type of guy. He lands about as much as he takes in. He lands 3.76 and absorbs 3.72. He gets like he does get clipped up a bit after a while, and that's when starts getting sloppy. But I think in this one, I think this is one where I see a lot of value with him as the underdog, and even when if he gets taken down, I think he's good enough to be comfortable off of his back and try to be offering a submission threat and nonstop. Brady Heiston probably will be the first one to take Jake Hadley down, but I think Jake Hadley will almost allow that takedown to happen. Ultimately, if he can either submit Heiston, I think. I don't know if he will TKO him, but I think ultimately Jake Hadley may just win by control time or submission in this one. So I have Jake Hadley. He's my 3-weight. What are your thoughts on this fight, Nick?
I don't have an official weight on it. I personally was so torn, like, and a lot of it was because of the wrestling aspect of it. Like, I see that Jake Hadley looks like he's gotten 5 career submission wins, never been submitted and never really been finished, never KO'd or submitted. But at the same time, like, his UFC tenure's been really up and down. He loses by decision, but also against good fighters. Like, I don't know. Like, I feel like it's hard to pin Jake Hadley, and maybe he isn't that worried about being put on his back. But I feel like no matter who you are, unless you're literally like Khabib or from Dagestan, being on your back is still not ideal. So I do like, just statistically and after looking at things, you almost have to favor Brady's ability to wrestle too. And maybe it's not better than Jake Hadley, but it's at the very least respectable. The fact that he gets a rear naked choke against Garrett Armfield recently and a knockout win before that. So he's finishing guys in the UFC too. And yeah, man, it kind of seems like Jake Hadley's, at least up until his most recent fight, Jake Hadley is get a finish or lose. And I was a little bit unwilling to take a risk on either one of these guys in my mind. Brady Heistan has not done anything to get my respect, at least to pick against a guy like Jake Hadley. So I had to leave it off my board.
No, yeah, and that's totally. I totally understand that, and yeah, some that about it too is I'm always like I haven't seen enough out of Brady Heiston to really make me want to like wow, and like I see something that he's gonna do to definitely beat Jake Hadley. I think if anything, Jake Hadley is I just think it's just gonna be like any other fight from like nothing too special. Where Brady Heiston's still. I mean, he's already some fights in, but obviously both these guys are trying to move up the ladder, but. I feel pretty good with Jake Hadley being my 3-weight. So, and I think he may even get a submission. So that being said, yeah, I got Jake Hadley as my 3-weight.
And then we're bringing a lot of fights to you guys tonight. We got a couple, situations where, a couple more than normal, I would say, situations where one of us picks a guy and the other did not have a say in the matter. So this will be another instance of that. For my 2-weight, I will be taking Darren Elkins to open what's currently listed as the first fight of the main card. So opening the main card, and he's going to take Daniel Pineda to the deep end and get the win against Daniel Pineda. Darren Elkins is currently a slight underdog, although this fight is not currently listed on FanDuel for whatever reason. I did find odds on some of the Vegas casinos as well as DraftKings, in which they have Darren Elkins as a plus 105 dog and Pineda as a minus 125 favorite. So in the consensus is that Pineda is the slight favorite here, and to me, I'm taking Darren Elkins, who is an absolute dog. He might not be the best guy in the division, he might not be live for a KO, but he does not give up, and he pushes forward no matter what. I think Pineda's going to struggle against the size disadvantage here. Darren Elkins has 3 inches of height and 2 to 3 inches of reach advantage. I think he's going to utilize that well in the smaller cage. Darren Elkins is just going to dog this one out. They both have a slightly even, but honestly, even Daniel Pineda has a negative striking differential. So he's absorbing more strikes than he's taking. He might resort to trying to wrestle Darren Elkins, which could be smart, but Darren Elkins has his own takedown average of 2.85 per 15 minutes. So both of these guys are almost similar fighters, but in my opinion, Elkins is more of a dog. And that dog mentality is going to be what wins him this fight. So my two weight says that I'm taking the plus of 105 value here on a guy that I've seen win the dog fights before. In the toughest parts of the fight, a round 3 submission against TJ Brown, right? When everybody's tired and exhausted, Darren Elkins is still going to be pushing through. When guys are bleeding with major injuries, Darren Elkins is going to continue pushing through. I don't have the same confidence in Pineda, so give me the dog. Any thoughts, Jose?
No, I did not talk about this fight. I to me it was a hard one to really pinpoint on it. Both guys are obviously vets. They're obviously matched up for a reason. Both just been in the UFC for a long time. Both 39 and 40. Ridiculous. Both have 28 wins and double-digit losses. So that being said, this was a tough one for me. I think I do like Derek Elkins. He is a dog, and he's still getting it done. A year ago, winning by submission, so he's still showing the ability to finish. And I'm just trying to make this is a featherweight fight, right? And I see that he has a decision win over Tristan Connolly, and I wanted to double check to make sure, is that the same Christian Connolly that has the win over Michelle Pereira, who is fighting middleweight? So that's just crazy. I'm just trying to what fight did that happen at? Because that's just
Yeah,
a
that is
big.
interesting. Connolly fought welterweight. Connolly, that is wild that Connolly fought 145 and 170. That is one of the bigger weight swings I've seen.
Yeah, that whole story. I'm like, wait, is this the same guy?
That's
Holy
pretty
cow!
interesting observation there, because it is featherweight, yes sir. And
Yeah,
Tristan Connolly has fought Michelle before he moved up to middleweight, so that's 175.
man, and that was only 2 years ago in 2022.
Or
So
sorry,
that's
170. But yeah, that's 135 to 170 or 145 to 170. 25
man,
pounds.
that's I I see why they did this. UFC's trying to set up a storyline during Elkins versus Michelle Pereira if they both win. Nah, I'm
Yeah.
just joking. But
If
it's a
only.
storyline.
If only. Yeah, let's see
But
Pereira
that
minus 2,000.
right, yeah. But you never know the damage. He's like a zombie. But that being said, no, dude, I like. I like Elkins as a pick as a lot. Dude's just tough, and I honestly, yeah, I think he can even get a finish in this one. So, I do not have a pick on him, but I do side with Elkins on this one.
Perfect. So that leads us to our last fight to discuss of Saturday afternoon. We've got dual one weights that I'll let Jose announce.
Yes, so for both our one weights, this is the flyweight bout between Charles Johnson and Sumuderji. Right now, Charles Johnson is a betting favorite at minus 235, and Sumuderji is a plus 180 underdog. Um, this was actually a tough one for me. Both guys are 16-6, and haven't really seen much of Sumuderji at least in a bit. Like, he has that win against lost. He lost to Tim Elliott about a year ago, and then before that, he went to war with Matt Schnell, and he ended up losing that one as well. And before that, he was looking good. He had a 3-fight winning streak. And then Charles Johnson, though, I like him a lot. Just a little more of a recent bias. He's already won 3 in a row this year, which really made up for the 3 that he lost the year before. But he's a very active fighter. He actually fought 4 times last year, and that being said, he's just extremely active. He's won 2 of his fights this year thus far. One of them against Jay Cadley. He won via decision, and then most recently beating Josh Van in via KO in the third round. So for this one, I like him just a little more just because of the high he's running on. And Sumudaerji, just he's not been as active, not nearly as active as Charles Johnson, I would say, as of most recently in the last couple of years. And that being said, like if he's coming back, he's only 28 years old, so he's still got a lot of time. Still, you can argue he's entering the prime of his life, and he's a finisher. Out of his 16 wins, 13 come KO/TKO. So he can be one of those dudes that just takes some time off and comes back, and it's like like you remember like why they're in the UFC or like why they were feared at some point, and he can totally ruin. Stop the train that's going on right now with Charles Johnson. He can totally derail his winning streak right now. So the threat is definitely real from Sumudaerji. I'm going with Charles Johnson on this one. Again, he is my one weight because obviously I'm the least confident in it, and but both on the feet, I think it's going to be a fun kickboxing matchup. And I think this fight will mostly be on the feet. So if any guy decides to um, uh, pick up the notch in wrestling a bit, that may swing their way. So that being said, I'm going with Charles Johnson on this one as my one weight. How about you, Nick? Well, who do you have for your one weight?
So I will agree. We'll finish off the show here with an agreement. Charles Johnson, of course, also my one weight. And if I'm not mistaken, Charles Johnson is the most active fighter as of like the last couple of years. We talk about Alex Pereira taking a bunch of fights and doing what he's doing, but if we go back to 2023 of January of 2023 till now, one, two, three, four, five, six, 7 fights for Charles Johnson. I say that's pretty impressive. I don't think anyone else, correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but I do not believe anyone else has reached 7 in that time frame of a year. That's really just short of 24 months, 22 months or so. That's pretty impressive. And Charles Johnson, like you said, has kind of been able to put together a hot streak. He ran into a 3-fight losing streak, and it kind of seemed like maybe the UFC isn't his place, but now he's able to come and beat Asmat Maksum, Jake Hadley himself, who we just discussed, and Joshua Van, who's coming off a win at UFC Noches at the Sphere, in which I predicted him to win against the Mexicans. So Charles Johnson really getting some respectable names under his belt, too, if you ask me. Joshua Van is not an easy opponent, and Suma Dwerji, I hate to take much away from him, but his experience is just the one thing I'll say about Suma Dwerji is he's coming off 2 submission losses, and Charles Johnson is not very much of a submission threat at all. So there is an argument to be made that Suma Dwerji's just run into a couple of really good grapplers, and he'll be able to find his place again against a striker. I just don't see that to be the case. I think Suma Dwerji is going to struggle against Charles Johnson. In all reality, they're similar sizes here, but I think he's outmatched on the feet regardless. And I think that's going to show in the cage as a one-weight pick for me. So that'll complete our picks for Money Lion for this Saturday night. This is UFC Vegas 99. And quick recap, my 5-weight Asu Amabayev. And the lock of the week will be Michel Pereira. Jose's 5-weight Michel Pereira. And it looks like as far as the underdogs go, it'll definitely also be Michel Pereira. He is somehow a plus 114 dog, so make sure to get your single bet out on him while that lasts. And then also, we're taking, I don't believe Charles Johnson is the dog, so in that case, we're taking Kyler Phillips, and Darren Elkins is the other one I'm trying to think of. I do have Darren Elkins, who's a plus 105 dog, and from there, we shall discuss next Monday. UFC, another belt will be on the line, so that should be UFC 308. I may or may not be losing track of which UFC pay-per-view that is, and trying to find that as we speak so that I don't forget. Yes, it is UFC 308, Topuria versus Holloway, and of course is the co-main event. My boy Khamzat Chimaev is fighting Robert Whitaker, so make sure to tap in here. A week from tonight, we will have our picks for this pay-per-view card, and we'll continue to make some money. We're back on the saddle with our 5-weight picks, so make sure to be betting on who we're picking because it's going to win you some money. Thanks for listening.